We hope that we have a good session for you.
All right, so welcome to SORBA Sessions, everyone. This episode is about creating robust industry partnerships, as you know from the title. Here with us are Natalie Narburgh and Doug Miller with Pisgah Area SORBA, and to everyone joining after the fact on YouTube, welcome as well. So first I'll introduce Natalie. She is Pisgah Area SORBA's Executive Director. Before joining Pisgah Area SORBA, Natalie worked as an educator, outdoor trip leader, and was Dean of Students at Asheville's French Broad River Academy for Girls. A lifelong learner, she holds 2 master's degrees and has a passion for environmental stewardship and protecting trail access. As an educator, she has had a tremendous amount of exposure to various communities and ideas, providing a wealth of knowledge and firsthand experience in seeing how recreation and conservation can work hand in hand for the benefit of all. When asked about her accomplishments in the last year with Pisgah Area SORBA, Natalie said, "Our volunteers have been knocking it out of the park with hours this year. We're launching a new website. We have trail counters in the forest, a part-time field inspector, and our relationships with land managers and our donors continue to strengthen." Welcome, Natalie, and congratulations on all these accomplishments.
Thank you.
Also with us is Doug Miller. Doug is Vice President of Pisgah Area SORBA, where he initiated the industry partnership program that we're talking about today. He's also head of mountain biking program at Camp High Rocks, where he teaches kids and trains counselors, works as a digital media specialist as well. Doug has a ton of experience and training, including instructor certification from the Professional Mountain Bike Instructors Association and a longtime wilderness first responder certification. He also has a master's in education and instructional technology. Welcome, Doug.
Hello.
Also in the session today is Philip Darden, SORBA's executive director, who most of us know, but for those of you who don't, Philip is a former bike racer, bike shop manager, a professional graphic designer, photographer, and proud parent of the sweetest pit bull, Eleanor, who I think we can see maybe. Philip's always on the go lately. He's been from DC to Alabama, Chattanooga, this weekend, Huntsville for Fall Fest. Philip's a busy guy, but he wasn't going to miss this conversation today. So thanks for being here, Philip.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And I'm Jen Flavin, SORBA's development director. I have a background in nonprofit management, including counseling, grants, fundraising, and corporate partnerships. I've got a master's degree in social work, and I'm a member of the National Ski Patrol. I'm excited to share this session with our listeners because I love this stuff, but mostly because I want to share the message that you don't have to be a development professional in order to grow your industry partnerships. A lot of chapters out there are led by people from a wide variety of professions, and you can learn the basics of how to do this, even if you've never asked for any funding before, even if you've never been in this realm. So stay tuned. You'll be off to establishing industry partnerships in no time. Before we dive in, I'd like to thank today's sponsor, French Broad Adventures. French Broad Adventures leads a wide variety of thrilling adventures throughout Asheville and Western North Carolina. They offer adventure packages where you can save on all thrills, chills, and occasional spills into the water. Their experiences explore one of the world's oldest rivers, impressive waterfalls, and canyons that are 99% of tourists will never see. They're the best family-owned whitewater rafting, zip lining, e-mountain biking, and canyoneering company in Western North Carolina. French Broad Adventures off-road e-bike tours are the most engaging way to experience 2 national forests in one day. You can bike where few go in Western North Carolina and East Tennessee. For more information about these memorable excursions, visit FrenchBroadRafting.com or visit their Facebook page at facebook.com/FrenchBroadAdventures. So SORBA would like to thank French Broad Adventures for their generous partnership and support. And I also know I travel a lot on my bike, and if someone's willing to show me around, it's a huge benefit. So I can see why people would really value that experience. So let's dive in. If our listeners have any questions as we go, please put them in the chat. We'll address them at the end of the presentation. So we'll start with you, Doug. You established the program initially. What made you identify the need in the first place for an industry partnership program?
Well, thanks for having me, first of all, and for having us here to talk about all this. I feel like it was really more of a need to establish just structure and organization, and this avenue presented itself as a good opportunity and a good format to do that. So we, when I first came on board, we were having some success in fundraising, but it was very ad hoc and kind of all over the place. So I recognized the need to, at the very least, because we did have some existing partnerships with industry folks, to start to firm up, what those relationships look like and what the commitments look like annually, and how we might kind of put it together in a way that we could bring more people on board and more businesses on board. So really just like looking for a system at all. And that was a good kind of, to me, it felt like low-hanging fruit for us to go after. We're on to like some other initiatives that, are outside of the world of industry partnerships. So I think for me, this was like step one of kind of establishing, some order and structure around fundraising as a whole, was to do this. And this felt like a good way to go forward with that.
So then it was handed off to Natalie. Natalie, once you came on, what was the handoff like with that? How did you all stay organized in the delegation of tasks and the division of who was doing what?
Well, Doug is really amazing to work with because he already is very organized and had things established. And I think that the biggest thing was we just had consistent touch points. So Doug and I would have a meeting every other week. I think we started it once a week, just to kind of touch base on the onboarding of the fundraising side of things, and then really pulling in and relying on the relationships that other folks had with some of the industry partners. So, for example, if there was an industry partner that our president of the board had a strong relationship with, and perhaps he was the one that had communicated a lot with that person in the past, kind of having that trade-off of introductions as to who I was and kind of passing off that contact info and then letting me start to build that relationship. We also keeping an industry partnership program organized is definitely the biggest challenge, I would say. Like keeping up with the renewals of industry partners, keeping up with the outreach to them, especially because the way that our system is set up, at least, it's not like January 1st, you have your opportunity to join us as an industry partner. You obviously want to keep that door open all year long, which means that you're continuously having different industry partners that are up for renewal for the next year. And managing that system can be a challenge. We use Salesforce as our management platform, which is an incredibly powerful system that we're still figuring out because it is a burly one. It's a bit of a beast. But I think that just staying on top of those email reminders and continuing to build those relationships, it takes a lot of time. And so the consistency in reaching out is a time suck for sure.
So it sounds like it was a lot of communication on the front end. And then do you still maintain ongoing communication? Like Natalie, are you basically managing all the partnerships, or do you have a team on board that helps you?
Yeah, that's a good question. We have a fundraising committee. And so I've been in this executive director position for almost a year and a half-ish. And so it's getting to the point where now we're kind of, I'm able to take up more and more of the relationships. But there's definitely still points when I'm relying on folks in the committee and relying on Doug heavily as the fundraising chair to kind of to help with the outreach and the delegation of who's reaching out to who. At this point, it is still consistent relationship building, and it also becomes clear the industry partners that you have a stronger relationship with. There's some that we interact with much more frequently than others, and that is partially just due to their capacity and their interest in being involved. We also have a tiered system, which we'll get to in the presentation, but depending on the level of the industry partnership too, that is also kind of helps dictate how often you're communicating with them, and how often you're maybe reaching out to them if you have a raffle going on or you want them to be involved in another event, to really continue that relationship.
I'll just Natalie has essentially taken over all communication with partners. I really, like, compared to what I've done in years past, I feel like I basically do nothing at this point other than talk with her about, strategies and things. But the time is important. And that's one of the things, like when I started to do this, I recognized very quickly that I wasn't going to be doing a lot of trail work, because my volunteer time was going to be committed towards the fundraising stuff and building those relationships. And it's important for whoever's going to do this to recognize that that time is really what they're giving. The fundraising commitment is time consuming. And so you can't get into this point where there's like, going to be some guilt about, I didn't get out and do trail work, and all the rest of the organizations out there doing trail work. But your job is this, because the funding is important for the organization to function. But it is largely relationship building, and that's what takes time. And that's really, like Natalie said, that's the transition that took place, was just building relationships with the folks that she needed to meet, and trying to continue to engage with them throughout the year in various ways. Well, I guess we'll probably talk more about how you have done that since you took over, Natalie, but that's a big part of it, is just maintaining communication with the folks that, are already friends with you at this point.
Well, and Doug, that's a great point to bring up. And I hear it a lot of times from chapter leaders where the emphasis is so much on the actual trail work is volunteer times, and don't take account for people that do volunteer their time for development purposes or relationship building, which is just as important. And that's why, I love to ask people what their favorite trail tool is. And, when I ask that question and nobody brings up something that's, not typical, like they'll say, oh, a McLeod or a Pulaski or like a ditch witch, they'll name all those things. And I'll say a camera, because you got to take pictures of what you got going on, and you got to share that story. And like, for instance, you could say my email, because I keep in communication with all these people that help fund the organization to keep the train moving.
Yeah, or when I first started, it was a PowerPoint as I could get. There was a lot of COVID. There were a lot of COVID stuff going on, so the goal was to get a Zoom meeting like this and have a PowerPoint ready to show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could say Canva now, right?
Yeah, Canva, all the things, all the different tools.
Yeah. Well, Natalie, do you want to launch into the presentation that you guys have created for us? We really appreciate you putting this together too. So everyone watching, they're going to have this visual for you too, and maybe take some notes, because there's a lot to be learned here.
Yeah. Let's go for it. So I have an agenda, but for some reason this won't let me go. There we go. So this is kind of how Doug and I will take you all through kind of what an industry partner program is to begin with, because I'm assuming that y'all are here or you're watching this after the fact because you would like to start this or make it a little bit more robust if you already have this at your chapter in your organization. But the benefits of it, the value of it, a little bit of the history, which we've already kind of covered, some tips on creating your own program, and then potential drawbacks, which are always good to keep in mind if you're going to launch something, especially something that is going to require volunteer time and dedication, like Doug was saying, and you want consistency in that person as well, because it's relationship based. So looking at potential drawbacks. So first, there's a little bit of a definition if you're curious. So we kind of view an industry partnership program as exactly what Doug was describing in the beginning. The need that we saw was we needed a system which would allow businesses and communities, parts of the community, to support our chapter by establishing basically a structure. And that structure can dictate how we engage with those partners, the different levels of partnership. If you have that package already ready and you present it to somebody, they're much more inclined to get involved, as opposed to, you walking into the local bike shop and being like, hey, we want to work together. And they're like, cool, how do I even do that? So providing them with the structure is really beneficial. Some of the benefits and value, it's obviously the number one is increasing the funding for your chapter. So using the industry partnership program as a way to financially boost your organization based on their levels of giving. And then the kind of behind the scenes is just that connection and support from the biking industry, if they are bike related businesses, which I would say, Doug, we have probably like 85% of our industry partners, I would say, are bike industry organizations. And then the others are the owners of the company just really love biking. So there's the bike connection is there for sure.
There's that they all have some connection to the trails for sure.
Yeah. And you might see it, like a gravel company or a stone company, which obviously they would be able to help participate with different material that you need for a trail project. And that's where in-kind donations can come in as well. So you have the increased possibility just for bank account money, and then you also have the increased possibility for in-kind donations. And then from there, you can kind of run with it. You can help get word out about different projects. We even have used an in-kind donation. We'll get into this a little bit later for building out the inside of a tool trailer. So you can be really creative with it as well. And we kind of, Doug, this is the industry partner program is Doug's creation. So I want to make sure, is there anything on here that we want to highlight or that we didn't get to in the intro?
No, I think you're spot on. I mean, this slide here represents what we kind of talked about already. The current industry partners, like if you look on our website, you can see who they are. And Mike, you asked what mix of partners are local or from a wider area. You know, everybody's represented on the website, so you can kind of see from that. But it's generally, we're very fortunate to have a lot of bike industry folks here in the Asheville area, so we can rely a lot on some of our local partners, but we do have other partners that are not here. But most of those, again, came from relationships, right? Like we have a good relationship with WTB because of our relationship with Sierra Nevada. And through that relationship with Sierra Nevada, we ended up meeting them with some other trail stewardship group out in California where they're based. So we have, you know, this partnership from a West Coast company like WTB that works, but it's also through, you know, local relationships. So we are fortunate in that sense, but you never know, you know, relationships stretch around the world. So you can't limit yourself to just local stuff. You definitely want to be open to anybody that's interested, but we will probably talk about this a little more, but you definitely have to look at it from the perspective of what's best for you too, and what's best for your organization. Like you're not just taking their money, you're tying yourself to that brand and they're tying them to your brand. And there's a lot of that, you know, that needs to be considered when you're taking on partners and when you're maybe even taking on partners that do similar things where there might be some sort of implied, you know, benefit to the partner to have exclusivity that maybe wasn't there, but you have to worry, you know, you have to start thinking about those things too. So not every partner is the right partner, but there's a lot of them that are out there. Start exploring your individual relationships and their individual relationships, and the web just starts to go on and on. In terms of the donor management system that's on here, definitely get one. You need one in order to make this work. You don't want to rely on a spreadsheet. It's very difficult to manage with just spreadsheets. So there's lots of different donor management systems out there. We got Salesforce, basically, we've got it for free. They have grants and you can apply and get free licenses. So it's a very expensive software if you purchase it, but you can get it for free if you are so inclined to go through that process. There are other softwares, types of software that are available that are very similar, but what you're looking for is something that will have some automations and some integrations with your payment platform. So when you take money online, you want to be able to also track that, right, from the individuals that you receive money from outside of your industry partnership. So you want something that's kind of comprehensive, that's going to also track your individual donors as well as your industry partner. So don't think about this, just donor management systems bigger than just the industry partnership. So I do want to stress that you want to think outside of just this partnership. Otherwise, you probably could do it on a spreadsheet, but because it's something that you're going to tie into your entire, you know, fundraising system, you want to think a little bit more broadly when you're getting that system in place. And there's lots of them. Many of them cater to nonprofits to some degree or another. So Jen's probably a better resource for that, honestly, at this point than I am, having worked in that world a little bit more. Again, I'm not a nonprofit fundraising professional. I think Jen implied that earlier. That's part of the beauty of this, is you don't have to be. I was not when we started this thing. I was just someone who likes systems.
And
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead, Jen.
I was just going to say, I think that's such an important point because it's daunting for people who aren't nonprofit professionals. So we really appreciate that clarification, Doug. So go ahead, Natalie.
Yeah, and part of the system, in addition to the donor management system, and being able to track how much money was donated and when and by who, and gather that information, you also want your SOP, your standard operating procedure, as a chapter of like, when we receive a donation, what's our next step? Do we send them a thank you note? Do we call them? Do we go out and get coffee again and thank them that way? Like, you want to have your system set as well, so you know what to do if a donation comes in, and it's not just kind of like somebody donated and then they don't hear anything. So that's also part of the SOP system should be in there. All right. So this is a quick overview of our process, sharing it in the hopes that y'all might be able to take bits of it or modify it, etc. So typically our industry partnership program is, normally it's initiated by a case by case. Historically it has been, and that's when we would lean on our board and lead on other members of the community that were really connected to pull in their relationships. So maybe the buddy that you ride with every Saturday actually knows the owner of this business that also likes mountain biking, and then you can ask them to make an introduction, and then from there you can pursue the industry partnership. And this is something that Doug was mentioning earlier. Sometimes it's okay to also say no thanks if it's not the right fit. So we have had companies or organizations, even if it's just an email and it's more of an in-kind donation, where they're coming at it a little bit more of a marketing of, they would like to get their name or their brand out, but perhaps it's a conflict for you. If you already have somebody that provides you with tires for every raffle and you have a really strong relationship and you want to maintain that, you probably don't want to be like, yeah, any tire, everybody give me your tires, I'm going to take it all and say yes to everything, because everything is so based in relationships. You need to be a little bit savvy about what works best for you as a chapter and who you want to be tying your name to, and the same with who's offering.
Can I add just so it's so important, because your brand is very valuable. Everybody who's on this call and everyone who represents a trail stewardship organization, for businesses to align themselves with an organization that's out there doing great things, that's a valuable thing, and you can't just give it away to anybody who wants it. So you have to be mindful of like those types of partnerships, and when you have the ability to think more critically about who you're going to work with. And I can give you some examples just broadly. We had a coffee company reach out at one point that wanted to do a coffee partnership, but it really wasn't the right percentages, and we already had a coffee partnership that we wanted to drive people towards, right? So that we didn't have an exclusive thing with the coffee partner, but we didn't want to step on our own feet. We didn't want to have a thing where we're selling coffee here and coffee there, and everybody's kind of doesn't know where to go to get support coffee that's going to support our organization. We had a solar company reach out that tried to do, like Natalie said, very much more of a marketing effort on their behalf. They wanted to use our network of individuals through our mailing lists and our social media accounts and everything else to get, discounts and things on solar, but it really wasn't going to result in any kind of great thing for us. So it was a pretty easy no. But there's lots of times, even with our existing partners, where we have to be mindful of, what we allow them to do. So again, we have, a pretty strong relationship with Industry 9, and we've had to say no to other partners who want to give us wheels to put on bike raffles, right? Because that bike raffle is a pretty big deal for us that we do every year. And we want to make sure that we put Industry 9 wheels on there. And so we've had to say no to other people that we are partners with, but they also make other things in addition to wheels. And so we've had to kind of manage what we say yes to in a lot of different ways. So it's okay. Early on, it's going to be hard because everyone's going to want you to just grow, but you have to grow at a pace that works, and you have to do it with the right partners, or else it's not going to work out long term.
Yeah, exactly. And you also be cognizant of, if you're super gung-ho and you go out and you start emailing every business that just recognize that your systems are going to get overloaded very quickly, especially if you're relying on that volunteer time. That every new industry partner that you add on is going to add on hours to whoever's managing the system and working on those relationships. So just be cognizant of that as well. Like, what is your capacity? How many industry partners do you want to aim for in the very beginning? Because you can always add on more. And it's okay to say no, or we're going to approach these guys later because it makes more sense for our organization. So after there's some sort of initiation, which this step number 1, initiated case by case, I said that historically it has been by that. In our new website, which we just launched, we also are adding a form where if somebody is interested, they'll actually be able to submit a form to express their interest. So if there's folks out there that maybe we don't have a relationship with yet, they might be able to reach out to us and establish that relationship if they're really passionate about our mission. So it's just another, opening up the avenue and the venue. So that's something new that we're adding. So after you do have that initiation, you have a meeting, which ideally the meeting is initiated by the person who has the strongest relationship with that organization or individual. And then when they do commit, after you've kind of given your little presentation and talked about your mission, always making it super mission oriented, because that's why they should be wanting to invest in their local trails and their local trail stewardship organization, is because they're passionate about it. You also can have your own incentives, like you get your logo on our newsletter and you get our logo on our website, and our newsletter goes out to 2,700 people, so you'll be able to get that much outreach. There are things that you can create to incentivize it, but ultimately the hope is that if it's a good partnership, they're truly driven by your mission and not necessarily by what they're going to gain out of it, but recognizing it's a two-way street. So once commitment is received, sending a thank you. I think a personalized thank you note is always a really nice touch, or a personalized phone call, not just like an email or a printed script that you send off, because again, relationship building, you want them to get to know you as an individual. And then if you do choose to put their logo on your website or in your newsletter, making sure that in that follow-up you ask for their logo, so you're really organized for however you decide to recognize them as a new industry partner. You're already set to go whenever that has to happen. And then step 5 is, this is still something that we're working on. And yes, our industry partner program has been very successful, and that doesn't mean it's perfect. Every system and structure can continue to be improved. And the recognition of our industry partners on specifically social media posts is something that we want to improve upon, and just kind of figuring out how that looks, what the best approach to that is. We have not consistently done a great job of shouting out our industry partners, and we're very aware of it and we want to improve on it. I think it also goes to show the fact that our industry partnership program is so strong, despite the lack of social media, like Instagram recognition. I think it does still go to show that these folks are wanting to get involved, not because they want the glory of an Instagram post from us, but because they support our mission. So something to consider.
Yeah, that part's definitely evolving. The thing to remember is that, like, it's a living, breathing thing. It's not a static system that you just set in place and don't tend to. You definitely have to think about how those partnerships evolve. And I feel like, Natalie, we're trying to be more sophisticated about how we give them the shout outs and love on social media too. Whereas at the beginning, it was just kind of me making a graphic with like a big thank you on it, and really basic, unsophisticated stuff. And now we're trying to get to the point where, like, how do we put them into the scene of the picture or whatever image we're using a little bit more organically, without just such a, blatant in your face thing, and then making sure that we give them the opportunities that a partner should have, like getting the opportunity to be a part of our bike giveaway, or being a part of events that we're hosting, or any other number of ways you could get the word out, whether they want to give our trail crew t-shirts to wear, stickers to put on helmets and things like that. You can get really creative with how you follow through and give them recognition, but it is important. And that's probably the harder part of the whole thing, is like coming up with those creative ways to do that. The website is an easy one, in my opinion, and the social media seems easy, but it can be a little complicated because you've got a lot of other things to put out there, and you don't want to just feel like all you're doing is shouting out fundraising stuff all the time. You definitely have to balance that out with all of the work you're doing, because, like Natalie said, it's about the mission. Ultimately, it's about the work. And in order to get more people on board with what you're doing and ultimately raise more money, you need to show people and prove that work is valuable to the community that you're serving.
Exactly. All right, so in-kind donations, we define this as a non-monetary donation that is valued at 50% the MSRP. And we oftentimes will ask for a fake invoice in order for us to help document this and keep it for our records and whatnot. So some examples, I mean, if you have a bike build and somebody like Industry 9 is donating, I don't know, $1,500 wheels, then you take that at 50% of what they would have gotten if they sold them, and then that counts towards their industry partnership program. The services, so for example, we have some local builders that have actually kind of gifted us a trail work day. So, you know, you have access to a professional trail crew, one additional day from the project that we're already contracted with, and then that can be taken at 50% as an in-kind donation, and then we can call upon that professional trail crew for a day's work, and they're now an industry partner. Building out our trailer, that was another creative one, a photography session for a bike build. And again, the tricky part of this is the tracking. So this is another area of growth for us that we're working on, and we do a pretty good job of it now, but I would love us to get even better. When you have raffles and you have things throughout the year and you're asking for little donation pieces, all of those can add up. So from a company's point of view, if they write you a check, but then they also are giving you in-kind donations, they should be climbing the ladder of your industry partner, whatever level you have set. You know, you give us $1,000 and then you give us a donation and now you've bumped up to $1,500. And so making sure that you're tracking it and gathering those fake invoices can be really, really important to be able to get that done.
Natalie, one of the things you've done well that I think we could pass along to everybody here, with some of these relationships that are, you know, really strong, you can even have those conversations like early in the year and kind of think about what those donations might look like throughout the year, so that you've got a pretty good idea early on. Even though you might not do your bike giveaway until the fall like we're doing now, we knew, you know, that we were going to get the commitments we got early in the year because we'd already had those conversations back in January or February with those organizations. So, you know, think about it in that sense, that you can ask for commitments later on. It doesn't all have to be right away, especially if you know you've got big things coming up that you want to plan for. And then, you know, in-kind donations they really can be anything, but you don't need everything. So keep that in mind too. Like, you don't always need, like, as another one you often will have to say no to, are certain in-kind donations that just might not make sense. You don't need, you know, old used bike equipment. You don't need someone's old chainsaw that's going to require more maintenance than you're willing to give it. You know, those kinds of things are just important to keep in mind, that, you know, you need what you need. You don't need everything. And you can ask for some of those things too. Like with the photography session, we ask for some of these things specifically when we know we need them. But people are going to come to you once you have a program, and they're going to want to get involved. And you don't always have to say yes to what they're bringing to the table when it comes to the in-kind stuff either.
Yeah. So some potential drawbacks of, I mean, we kind of touched on all of these, but just the follow through and consistency and the maintenance of the program, that's just all time. That's very time based, and being very aware of your volunteer capacity, or if you have staff, your staff capacity, to be able to be consistent about that is so crucial. And it's important that it's the same person. You don't want to be passing off an industry partner. You know, if they've given you, you know, $500, $1,000, $2,000, they're giving you money, and that means that they deserve to have one touch point person. And if you're passing that off every single year or even every 6 months to somebody who a new volunteers coming into the mix and they're going to take over the program, maybe they get overwhelmed or their plate load changes at home, and so then they shift it off to somebody else. You want to try to maintain that consistency for sure. And then the determination of accepting partners. This is something that Doug's talked about a lot already, but just recognizing not even just between partners that you already are partnered with and the potential conflict of, like, if they are selling the same product and you want to recognize that you can't be a representative of every single organization and company out there, but also recognizing that, I mean, especially here in Pisgah, people are really, really passionate about about their local trails, and people get really passionate about certain spots and certain businesses and certain bike shops and things like that. So being in tune with your community and recognizing, oh, if I accept this donation from this particular company, is that going to ruffle feathers of the entire mountain biking community? So recognizing what you are tying yourself to if you do accept a donation, or being prepared to not explain yourself, but being prepared to have those conversations with folks that you anticipate might be like, why did you choose to partner with that individual or that representative, etc. So just being aware that some of those conflicts might arise.
It will arise when you least expect them to. That's the fun part. And
Yeah.
you take such a seemingly harmless donation, then it becomes a big thing.
Yeah.
Just be prepared for that. It can happen. It will happen.
And this is a little bit of a tangent, but you know, there's even grants that would fall under the same category. So I was talking with one of our board members who she used to be really involved with Bicycle Colorado, and I mean there were grants from certain organization, you know, like you think of I think it was an oil company or something like that, where there was this conflict of this morality and ethics of, well, like we don't want to really support fossil fuels and all of that, and should we accept this money, and is this, and it turned into a really big discussion among their leadership team, and that can happen at our chapter levels as well. Being aware of that, even for what grants you're applying to.
We famously got some hate, Philip knows, from accepting a grant from Mountain Dew. Right, they sell Mountain Dew, and the person didn't like that they sell them in plastic bottles and that it was Mountain Dew inside of it. So he was not happy. I mean, it was one individual. I don't think it went beyond that, but it's something that you end up having to deal with, and it's just to be aware of. They were not even officially industry partners. That, like Natalie said, they were just grant providers. We were the recipients of a grant. So but anytime you associate yourself with a brand or anything like that, you do have that potential.
Yeah. And then I talked about this on the last slide, but tracking the in-kind donations or smaller item donations, sometimes that can be difficult, even if it's, you know, if we have an events committee, and even if the events committee chair has reached out and solicited some donations for a raffle for an event coming up, the communication between, like, who did we ask things for and what did they give, because if they're already an existing industry partner, you want to make sure, like I said, you kind of add it to their account. So the tracking of that can be difficult. And I think that's all that we had.
That was an excellent presentation. Thank you all. For whoever has questions, you can go ahead and put those in the chat. I've got a couple, if anybody's okay with me kicking that off. Natalie, you mentioned the SOP system and how to thank donors. Would you mind to dive a little bit more into that, what that looks like? In the development world, it's hugely important. Some people believe, you know, donors should get a phone call within 48 hours. Some people send, there's also a theory that you should contact every donor 8 times before asking for money. So if you guys do outside contacts, I'm curious to know what that looks like. Things like a holiday card at the end of the year with a tax receipt and thank them for being part of it. What are some of the little extras maybe that you could key us into?
That's a good question. And we're launching like another program for individual donors as well that we're really excited about, that also has a communication SOP. So it's shifting a little bit for industry partners, but currently when we have an industry partner, basically as soon as we get the check or you get the donation online, I'll write a handwritten card. If I already have a strong relationship with that individual and I'm going to see them in person, I'll still do a card. I just really like to make sure that everybody gets the same thing. So a handwritten thank you note that you may put in the snail mail and send to them, because that actually does take a lot of time, and it's pretty meaningful nowadays to see somebody's handwriting, because that's not normal for us anymore. So I definitely do that, and I do that within 2 days of getting the actual donation. That will be in the mail, preferably the same day, depending on when it is the donation comes through. And then the follow-up We're still figuring out the SOP for this, but there should be a follow-up at least once or twice that are just kind of touch bases and touch points of like, hey, how's it going? Like, here's what we've been up to. We currently have a quarterly, we call it the insider report. And this insider report is a report that we send out to industry partners or major donors that kind of give a little bit of insider information into what's coming down the pipeline, or maybe some things that we've presented to the public but we haven't gotten in detail about, or maybe it's just little things that we want them to know about that we haven't publicized or we aren't going to publicize. And so having a quarterly touch point where they're basically getting information and getting updates on like, this is what your funds are going towards, this is the work that we're doing, and them knowing that they consistently can always reach out to me and ask questions about upcoming projects and things like that. That is one of the ways that we really have kept that touch base point. And then we would like to get to the point where, 1 month out from their renewal date, that there's an establishment of like, hey, just want to let you know that you're up for renewal in the next month. We would really love and appreciate the support that you can give our chapter. And then again, providing, like, it's okay to brag, and you should be bragging about the work that is being done, because these folks are giving money because they support your mission, and you should have a tangible things that you're doing to demonstrate that you are succeeding in accomplishing your mission. So I think it's perfectly okay to basically like send them things that you have done and things that you're planning on doing, because that's evidence that is going to just make them want to give you money more consistently. If it's just purely like, hey, thanks, you gave us money last year, will you give us money again this year, and you don't have things to back it up, then they're probably not going to renew.
Yeah, Natalie, it could be anything from how many volunteer hours your organization has completed. It could be events that you've hosted. It could be education initiatives you've started. It could be partnerships you've initiated or been a part of. Think like of all the things that you're doing. It doesn't have to just be hours. Hours are a big part of it, but there's a lot more to the story typically that you can tell to the folks that are supporting your organization. So that's a really good point, Natalie. And we have started as well doing an annual report. We did that last year for the first time, and we're going to do that again this year. And that's another thing that'll go out to industry partners and larger donors prior to putting it out there to the general public. So trying to give those opportunities, like to provide that inside information a little bit before it gets out to the rest of the world, or in a different way that makes them feel a little special, is helpful. And it just another way, an opportunity to brag about all the things you're doing that you want to let them know about. It can be a little hard for, some folks to do that, but that's why I really do think that kind of having that separation too from the trail crew helps, at least for me, because I can look at the trail crew a little bit more objectively and be really proud of it. And a lot of those guys are really, stoic individuals. They don't want to talk about what they're doing. They don't want anyone to post a picture of them. They just want to go out there and do the work and clock their hours and say they're good. But somebody's got to tell that story. So having a person that's dedicated to it and understands the value of that is really important, and making sure that it's getting to the right people.
And if you really want to get nuanced with it, understanding why an individual or why an organization chose to be an industry partner, like perhaps they're way more passionate about the advocacy work, or maybe they're way more stoked on a build that you have coming up in the next year. So knowing kind of like what drives them to want to be involved with you, and then you can kind of cater your conversations to them to be focused more on, these are all the advocacy conversations we've been having recently. These are the master planning sessions that we've been involved with. This is what's going on in the forest. Or you can make it be catered towards, this is a new sweet build that we have coming down the pipeline. Like, hey, would you want to look over this is the plan. We haven't released this to the public yet, but like, I know you'd be excited about it. Things like that. And also another, like, if they are local, just trying to make face a little bit. And even if it's not you as the individual that has a relationship, letting them know that there's other folks in your chapter that are involved. So we have quarterly socials and updates, and we'll often rely on some industry partners or local organizations to host those. I was just working in a coffee shop today that is one of our biggest industry partners, Cognitive, and he just opened a new brew house. And so trying to go to his business and see him, just say hey, ask how it's doing, just kind of like you would for a friend. If you're like, oh hey, you're set up over there doing work, I'll go swing by and say hey on my way out. So that goes a long way as well.
Yeah, and it sounds like then you're supporting them as well on their endeavors. So these relationships aren't just a one-way street, and that's important to recognize. So I also like that, talking about this, it made me think of how you said earlier, the distinction between the relationship with the person versus the relationship with the mission. So by giving them those updates, giving them the annual report, you're helping to reaffirm that like they're not just your buddy and you're not just being friends with them, although you are, you're also really connecting them to the mission. That way, if they do have to talk to someone else in your organization, they'll be able to still have those conversations and have other people they can connect to, because it's really all about the mission. So that sounds like a great way to do that. Does anyone else have any questions from our listeners? Kind of quiet. So I have a couple of others. Do you have any specific challenges of managing the donor relationships? I know the time, staying organized for sure. And it sounds like, avoiding conflicts of interest, but anything like, have you had donors that like personality conflicts or anything that would be like kind of interesting that you guys have run into that maybe weren't expecting?
We definitely, I guess anything can be controversial, right? Like, even though we all just love biking and we love being able to get out in the woods, like sometimes that can be controversial to people. So I would say I've definitely had some conversations that aren't they're not negative conversations per se, but they're open, honest, good conversations where questions are being asked, just like, hey, how did you guys come to this decision? Or why did y'all choose to pursue this project but not this one? Or why haven't I seen this new sick jump in the forest that I've been wanting for years? And so sometimes there is that, like, if you have an industry partner that is supporting you, they should have the ability to have those more difficult conversations with you where they're asking for clarity, or maybe you're educating them on the permit system that is required for the U.S. Forest Service for new builds to be made and things like that. So it's kind of like, I hate to say it in this way, but it's almost like they're paying for the ability to ask those questions. And it is true. We haven't had, to my knowledge, we've never had anyone that's like, I'm not supporting you anymore, because it is so relationship based that they know and they trust that we're going to make the right decision. And even if it's not what they would like to see, or the project isn't moving as quickly as they would like it to move, like they understand either there's red tape we're working through, or there was an issue with a map, or like whatever it is, and they feel comfortable enough to ask, like, hey, what's going on here? Can I have an update? And I've gotten phone calls from donors too that even are like, hey, I heard somebody complain in the shop about something that happened. Like, I just want to give you a heads up. Like, I know that y'all are doing the right thing out there. So how can I help change our messaging to the people I'm interacting with? Which is really awesome. Because we live in the world of miscommunication. And if misinformation and miscommunication is being spread, it's really cool to have members of the community that have your back because they trust you and they know that you're doing the good thing, and you've demonstrated that you're completing the mission. So that's kind of a benefit of the industry partner, keeping them in the close community, because it basically is like your sphere of influence just increases.
I have a question for you, and this is kind of maybe a different side of like partnerships, but for example, so I'm the programs director for the North Carolina Interscholastic Cycling League, and one of our programs is a teen trail course. So we're working with SORBA like last season, and we did a scholarship membership for our graduating seniors. And I had talked to Jim Grover about some ways that we can continue to encourage like the people in our league community to get more heavily involved in their local SORBA chapters. So being a local SORBA chapter, do you have maybe like 3 tips that you would give someone on our end of the cycling community, tips that we can promote kind of positive engagement with people with chapters, especially working with youth? I know it's not necessarily helpful for us to be like, hey, team with 40 middle schoolers, go show up at this work day. But some ways that we can help them become really good advocates of their local chapters at a young age, so they are getting involved and getting part of that, but that we can continue to support in ways that are beneficial to chapters.
Yeah.
Natalie, I would just brag on Tyler and Jared for a little bit. Those guys, that's Jared's our previous trail crew coordinator, and Tyler's our current trail crew coordinator. And I think when it comes to our NICA relationships and connecting with those groups, we've really relied on those two to be engaged with the groups and create those like special opportunities for them. I think there's really, you know, the SORBA chapters definitely want to work with the NICA groups. I think it's really just all about asking them to kind of create the opportunities that are going to best suit your needs. Because you're right, like no, we can't accommodate a group of 40 middle schoolers unless we plan for it. But if we plan for it, we can do it. And it could be a really big day and could be a lot of fun for both groups and have a lot of really good community engagement. There's food involved, and there's lots of ways to make it more fun. And that's definitely what you want to do with the younger groups too, is like, you don't want to just go out there and ask them to work. You at least want to give them some good food and like have a good time while you're doing it. Maybe bring a tackle on a ride or something that might be a part of it. But just making sure that you're creating the opportunity like specific for that group, I think is really good. And our 2 trail crew coordinators, current and past, really did a good job with that. And they've worked with other groups like NICA, local, you know, community youth groups and things, and colleges. You can replicate that template across lots of different organizations. So I would just try to look for those opportunities. Natalie, do you have more to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd definitely say that making it organization specific. So it's not just if there's a work day every Saturday, not just tacking on to that existing work day, but really making it unique and special. And what Philip said, I don't know if this was before the call or after we started recording, but that his favorite trail tool is a camera, and using that and like making sure that it's getting documented and then shared over and over and over. Because even just the visual of young people out taking care of the trails and having fun being able to do that is huge. And that is such a big influence to the community. And making sure that working with the local chapter, that there's the expectation, and the chapter I'm sure understands this, of like, hey, I was a middle school teacher for 9 years. So it's like, there's certain tasks that you want to give middle schoolers and there's certain tasks you don't want to give middle schoolers, and making sure that whatever that trail work day is appropriately designed for them to have a blast and want to be able to do it again. That's really important. And then the last thing I'd say is just including the storytelling piece of it is really, really big. So it doesn't, like, there can be a lot of support and a lot of community engagement that doesn't involve going out to do trail work on a Saturday evening. It can also just be word of mouth. It could be attending a social. It could be hosting a barbecue at, after a NICA practice and just coming out and talking about trail work. Like, there's some more creative ways that doesn't have to just be limited to the day itself.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and I'd like to expand on that. And I think Doug and Natalie did a wonderful job answering that question. But from a NICA team's perspective, I would look at the SORBA chapter as an industry partner. They're a partner for your organization. So one of the things that I've seen that's a challenge is the NICA teams will want to help and they'll want to participate. But they'll send an email to the local SORBA chapter and say, hey, next Saturday, I've got 30 kids that want to have a work day. What can we do? And rather than having that approach to it, you have this relationship with somebody and you get their opinion on, hey, if we were to bring in this amount of people and this group of kids, what do you think would be applicable? Do you have a weekend that works best for you? Rather than just like trying to plop it on there and then the chapter's almost forced to, like what Natalie said, to throw them into that every Saturday workday, which, you know, isn't going to be a good experience for everybody. And ensuring that that good experience is there comes from the front end and that communication between the two groups. I have a question. And I think that not only a lot of people on the call, but a lot of people that may be listening to this later will have is, you know, say you're starting a program completely from scratch and it's a whole brand new program and you're looking at all this information and you're like, gosh, I've got to get all this stuff together. But at the end of the day, what do you feel like is step number one in developing your industry partner program? Like, where would you start if you had to start all over again? Would you start in the same place that you began initially, or would you start with one thing and move from there to the next step?
I mean, hindsight's always 20/20. You know, you can always I think it's important that you're at least evaluating it and you're going through the process of looking for those opportunities to change, because you're not going to get it right the first time. There's going to be things you're always going to want to update, and you know, you eat the elephant one bite at a time, as they say, right? You don't do it all at once. You do little by little, and you make it, you know, work in a way that's going to work for you. So, you know, I think the other big thing that I've kind of left out that you reminded me of, Philip, is early on in the process, one of the most important things I think that I did to make sure this was going to work was that I had to really make sure I was getting buy-in from the board and from the rest of the team, right? Like, this wasn't just an individual effort. If I just went out there to do this on my own, but never got that approval and that buy-in from the rest of the board, I would have still had a discombobulated system with people running all over the place looking for sponsors, and I would never have gotten the word to the people that needed to understand this is how we're now going to do this stuff. And everybody agreed to it, so that all of the partnership stuff starts getting funneled through the appropriate channels, right? But in order to do that, you've got to get that buy-in. And it's really important with any major change that you get buy-in from the people that you're asking to adopt that change. So that was an early thing that happened before we launched it. Like, I got my matrix together. I put together a little graphic with, this is how many social media posts a titanium sponsor is going to get versus a steel sponsor. And I had a plan. It was clearly not all fleshed out. We had to build upon it and grow some things as we went. But that initial thought and that initial plan got presented to the board prior to it ever getting launched into the public. And that was what we were able to put together and get agreement on. And then we go from there and we continue to make it better and better. But early on, that's very important.
So developing a plan and having a product, and then also making sure that everybody's on board.
Yeah, 100%. You can't just go at it alone. You've got to make sure that people who are going to be partnering with you and working with you and helping to develop this along the way are going to be in on it. You know, that they're also aware of what you're up to, and that this isn't just, you know, something that you've come up with that you put out on your own. It's something that the organization has put together, that the organization is behind, and that everybody is on board with this. Even if it's just the initial, you know, matrix. Then start with that, and then go from, you know, now I've got my matrix, and now I've got to figure out what we're going to do for our standard operating procedures, and go one step at a time. But, you know, make sure that you're every step along the way you can get buy-in, and celebrate it when you have a chance too. Like, those are big things to get that stuff done. So when you get that stuff done, you know, at least internally, make sure you celebrate that, and give each other a high five, and know that you're making progress.
Awesome. Thank you.
That's good advice in the development world, is to celebrate, because you get a lot of no's too. So that's great. Anyone else have any questions? We can wrap it up pretty soon if we don't. I think we're right on time. One last call for questions. Any other comments or anything anybody wants to make from our listeners? Okay. Doug, Natalie, do you guys want to do any closing statements or any last lessons learned or pieces of advice?
I think I'm good. I think I've said everything.
I think
Yeah.
it's great.
Yeah, best of luck to everybody. And if you have any questions, definitely feel free to reach out. I'm actually going to be going out on maternity leave in 3 weeks or less, depending on timing. And so you can still email my email, which is natalie@pisgahsorba.org, and it will go to our interim director in the meantime if you have follow-up questions. But if it's in the next couple of days, I should be able to get back to you myself.
Thanks, Natalie. And anything development related, you all can email me to jen.flavin@sorba.org. I'm happy to help too. So thank you, Natalie and Doug, for your time and your expertise today. Thanks to our sponsor, French Broad Adventures, for their generous support. Thanks to everyone who joined the live session today and to everyone who's going to be listening to the recording. If you are listening live and you didn't take notes, you can always refer back to this episode. It'll be on our YouTube channel. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for supporting mountain biking in the South.
Thanks, Jen.
Bye.
Everybody.